Captain Emerald Ralston. June 6, 1944. D-Day. The largest amphibious invasion in history was underway, and Captain Emerald Ralston was leading Company A of the 1st Medical Battalion toward Omaha Beach, aboard Landing Craft Infantry Number 85, or the LCI-85 for short. His mission was supposed to be quite simple, to get 90 medics to the beach so they could begin saving lives. At 8:30 a.m., the LCI-85 approached the Easy Red sector of Omaha Beach, a notoriously difficult portion of the beach to capture. The craft was packed with medics and roughly 100 other soldiers. As the vessel neared shore, it scraped over German underwater obstacles and became stuck on metal pilings. Immediately, German artillery zeroed in on the stationary target. The first shell struck the forward section of the ship, blowing the landing ramp away. The crew tried to reverse off the obstacle, but they were too late. A second shell had already exploded below the waterline. This caused the lower deck to erupt into flames. Many of the medics trapped below deck had no escape as fire spread rapidly through the confined spaces. About 20 of the 90 medics made the desperate decision to climb up from underneath the deck and jump into the water, since in the moment, it seemed like a better fate than burning alive. As they began swimming towards the beach, German machine gunners would quickly cut them down, and many of them would never make it. Meanwhile, the ship began to sway to one side due to the flooding, all while the fire was still consuming the forward holds. Despite the grim situation, Captain Ralston and his officers decided to stay on the boat and help treat the burning soldiers. Working in the smoke and heat, he and the remaining medics pulled burned and bleeding men from the holds onto the deck. The medics were treating soldiers with fragments of hot metal still embedded in their bodies and men whose uniforms had been burned into their skin. They did all of this while artillery shells continued to land around the vessel. Around 10:30 a.m., with the ship taking on water and fire still raging, the boat captain turned the vessel around to transfer casualties to the USS Chase, which was located a few miles offshore. By 11 a.m., as the handful of surviving medics desperately unloaded the wounded, LCI-85 began its final moments. The ship rolled over and sank beneath the waves. But Captain Ralston's ordeal wasn't over just yet. Despite being burned himself, he rallied his surviving medics and loaded onto another landing craft. At 3 p.m., they attempted another assault on Easy Red Beach, and while they were partially successful at retrieving wounded men this time, many of the medics would be shot in the process. Many of the medics who had survived the burning ship were now being torn apart by shrapnel or drowned in the surf as they tried to pull others to safety. By the end of D-Day, only 12 of the original 90 medics from Company A, 1st Medical Battalion, were still alive and able to function. The rest had been killed by fire, drowning, artillery, or machine gun fire. So while Captain Ralston didn't die himself, nearly all of the medics he had been in charge of did, which is arguably worse. René Lemaire. December 1944. The Battle of the Bulge was Hitler's last major offensive in the West, and the small Belgian town of Bastogne had been caught right in the middle of it. American forces were completely surrounded by German troops in the coldest winter on record, and 30-year-old René Lemaire wasn't supposed to be there. She was a civilian nurse who had been working at a hospital in Brussels during the war. Her fiancé, a Jewish man, had been arrested by the Gestapo earlier that year. In December, she decided to visit her parents in Bastogne for the Christmas holidays. On December 16th, the Germans launched their surprise offensive, and René found herself trapped in the encircled town. On December 21st, she volunteered alongside another nurse, Augusta Chiwi, at a makeshift aid station in the basement of a grocery store. The building had been converted into a temporary hospital for the 20th Armored Infantry Battalion. For 3 days, René worked without rest. The basement aid station was overwhelmed with casualties. There were over 150 seriously wounded American soldiers crammed into a space never meant to hold them. There was no adequate food, no proper supplies, and no relief. René moved from patient to patient, administering what little medicine was available, changing blood-soaked bandages, and offering comfort to men who were dying far from home. December 24th, 1944. Christmas Eve. At around 8:30 p.m., the sound every soldier in Bastogne had learned to dread filled the air. German bomber engines. The Luftwaffe had come to deliver a Christmas present to Bastogne. As bombs began falling across the town, one 500-pound bomb scored a direct hit on the grocery store. The building shook violently as the bomb tore through the structure. The explosion was devastating, but Renee survived the initial blast. As the building began to collapse and flames spread through the wreckage, she immediately started evacuating the wounded. 1 soldier, 2 soldiers, 3. Renee pulled 6 wounded men from the burning, collapsing building, guiding them through smoke and debris to safety outside. Each trip back into the inferno was more dangerous than the last. Ceiling beams were falling, the fire was spreading, the structure was collapsing. But there was a 7th man still inside. Renee went back in. Witnesses watched her disappear into the smoke and flames one final time. The building groaned and shifted. Then finally, the entire structure had given up and collapsed inward. Renee Lemaire never came out. When battalion surgeon Dr. Jack Pryor found her body in the ruins, he discovered that she had been killed instantly when the building collapsed. According to some accounts, her body had been severed in 2 by falling debris. 30 American soldiers also died in the bombing. Dr. Pryor recovered Renee's remaining items and brought them to her parents, wrapped in a white parachute. It was the same parachute Renee had insisted on collecting that very morning, telling others she wanted to use it to make a wedding dress someday. She was buried in Bastogne's cemetery. Forever after, she would be known as the Angel of Bastogne. A memorial plaque now marks the spot where the grocery store once stood. Today, the location is now a Chinese restaurant, but the plaque ensures that no one forgets what happened there on Christmas Eve of 1944. Ray Lambert. Lambert was already a decorated veteran by the time he reached Normandy. He'd fought in North Africa, where he won the Silver Star for driving a jeep through enemy fire to retrieve wounded troops. He'd been wounded by shrapnel, slashed by a German bayonet in hand-to-hand combat, and had his jeep blown up by a mine. And in Sicily, he was wounded again. Now he was about to face his 3rd invasion. On the morning of June 6, 1944, just minutes before Lambert climbed down into his Higgins landing craft, he made a discovery that would haunt him. His older brother Bill was also on the same ship, also heading into the first wave. The 2 brothers had a brief conversation about their chances. They agreed that if one didn't make it, the other would take care of the fallen brother's family. And the landing craft's journey to shore was a nightmare. The English Channel was rough, with waves crashing over the sides of the small boats. Men were seasick, throwing up in the cramped space. As they approached the beach, Lambert could see the bullets hitting the water around him like hail. He later mentions, he told his men to dive underwater as far as they could to avoid the machine gun fire. The instant the ramp dropped, Lambert was shocked. A German machine gun crew had a perfect line of sight down to their section of beach. The bullet went through his right arm, shattering the bone. Blood poured from the wound, but there was no choice. Go forward or die. Despite his shattered arm, Lambert began treating wounded soldiers. He and his remaining medics dragged casualties toward a chunk of German concrete on the beach. The noise was deafening. Artillery shells, mortars, machine gun fire, and the screams of dying men created a wall of sound that made communication almost impossible. Then something massive struck Lambert's leg, likely shrapnel, opening it down to the bone. Lambert wrapped a tourniquet around his leg and injected himself with morphine to dull the pain. He tried to brief another medic on how to take over for him, but they were yelling at each other just to be heard over the cacophony. As Lambert tried to explain what needed to be done, a bullet went through the other medic's head, killing him instantly. But Lambert had no choice but to keep going. He went back into the water to pull out drowning soldiers. He pulled one man to shore, then another, and that's when it happened. As Lambert was helping a wounded soldier emerge from the surf in about 4 feet of water, a landing craft rushed up to the beach to discharge more troops. In the chaos and poor visibility, the crew didn't see Lambert or the wounded man. The craft's ramp, a massive steel sheet weighing hundreds of pounds, dropped directly onto them. The weight of the ramp drove both men down, pushing them to the bottom of the seafloor. Water closed over Lambert's head. He couldn't breathe, and he couldn't move. The pain in his back was excruciating, and he was drowning under the weight of the landing craft's ramp. In what Lambert would later describe as a miracle, the landing craft crew suddenly reversed their engines and backed up. The ramp lifted, and Lambert, with his back now broken, somehow found the strength to drag the wounded soldier to shore before losing consciousness. And when he woke up, he was on a landing ship heading back to England. A doctor was reading his dog tags. "We have another Lambert on here," the doctor said. Lambert looked over to see his brother Bill on another stretcher. Bill's arm and leg had been mangled so badly that doctors were considering amputation. But even in his condition, Ray found his voice to say, "Please don't do that," he begged the doctors. Bill survived with his limbs intact, but both brothers faced long recoveries. Lambert spent nearly a year in hospitals, first in England, then back in the United States, before he could walk properly again. He weighed just 130 pounds when he was finally discharged. Of the 31 soldiers in Lambert's landing craft that morning, only 7 survived D-Day. Lambert was credited with saving at least 15 lives before he was finally incapacitated, and the rock he hid behind for cover is now called Ray's Rock, with a plaque honoring his medical unit. While Ray Lambert didn't die, like the many other medics on this list, he would still carry the physical and psychological scars of that day for the rest of his life, later saying that even decades later, when he looked at rough water, he could sometimes still hear voices.